Okay, everyone, and welcome to this second IT live meeting presentation that we're happy to do here for the organization. Just a reminder, if you're just now joining, we are going to keep microphones muted until the end of the meeting. We prefer that you put your questions in the chat if you have any, and we will get to them at the end of the meeting. The meeting is being recorded for future use, so whether you're joining us live or at some point in the future, welcome. Our goal here is to kind of demystify some of the technology in our meeting rooms. And what I've done is I've gone through and gathered the most common problems and common questions the IT team encounters from staff when it comes to meeting rooms. And we're going to try and address those today with some scenario-based training. So today's learning objectives, by the end of this presentation, I'm hoping you're going to be able to articulate the type of equipment in use at the ACA and its capabilities, understand which rooms meet which needs. They're not all universal. So we'll kind of go over what equipment is there and how that can help facilitate a certain type of meeting and whether or not certain rooms are good fits for certain meetings. I want you to be able to conduct a typical Zoom meeting in a Zoom room, have some fundamental understandings of the control pads in the ABC combined rooms, which is Aho, Bradshaw, and Camelback. And then understand what some of the cables do and what to do with them. And we'll kind of talk about some of these configurations and what they mean. And I'm going to point out some of the pitfalls that people run into in meetings when it comes to cabling and how we can avoid that. So we have several different types of rooms here at the ACA, and I've compiled them into several different categories. First, basic configurations. Those are Verde, Salt, Agua Fria, Colorado, Basic Plus, Kofa, and Lemon, Advanced, Graham, Advanced plus Zoom, the new executive fourth floor meeting room, which really didn't get named as of this point yet, other than it's the fourth floor executive meeting room, the Humphreys room, and then our multi-function rooms, Aho, Bradshaw, and Camelback. And we will touch briefly on the Zoom cart, but I feel by the time we get to the Zoom cart part of the training, you will pretty much have all the knowledge you need to wheel that thing out and use it anyways. So let's first talk about our basic rooms. Verde, Salt, Agua Fria, Colorado. I intentionally left out the WIFA room from this presentation just because we really don't have the kind of usage for the ACA in that room, but it is part of our ER rooms environment. So a basic room is fairly simple. We have two pieces of equipment in there. We have a television, and then we have a thing that's called an AMX multimedia bar. It's the most basic two-cable system that we have in the environment. So in those rooms, what I did is I went through and I made an attempt to make the labeling as consistent as possible. So it's the same from room to room. So in our basic rooms, you will find an HDMI cable that's labeled TV, video, audio. And what that gets you is that gets you video feed to the TV from your computer and audio feed from your computer to the TV. We have a USB cable that's labeled as AMX, camera, audio, mic. That's going to get you audio feed from your computer to the AMX box, which is the speaker bar on the wall. That's going to enable you to get the camera on that bar to work on your computer. And it's going to get you the ability to use the built-in microphone that's in that box on your computer. The Bluetooth, it's in the air, so there's no label for it. But the AMX box is capable of running Bluetooth to and from your computer also. We're not going to, just for time purposes, we're not going to dive into the Bluetooth configuration on your computer for this training, but we are going to cover the cables. There is also a thing called the AMX control surface, which I kind of refer to as the puck because it looks a little bit like a hockey puck. That control surface, it can control the input source, it can control Bluetooth pairing, it can control volume, it can mute your speakers, it can mute the microphone, and it essentially matches the function of the side control panel. So this is the puck, and I'm going to show you here in a second how it mirrors the side control panel. But on the puck, you have the Bluetooth button at the top. You click that to enable Bluetooth pairing. You have a mute button for the speaker. You have a button to mute a microphone. Oftentimes people will confuse this with a power button. It is not for power. You have a button to end a phone call. You might kind of raise your eyebrows right there and go, what do you mean end a phone call? The AMX bar is capable of Bluetooth pairing to your cell phone, and you can use it like like you would a Bluetooth headset on your cell phone for phone calls. There's a button on the back that changes the input selector, which I'm going to show you here in a second. And then the dial at the very top of the puck spins, and you use that to control the volume that's coming from the speakers. Very common misconception. The puck is not a microphone. There's been several occasions where people have come to me and said, hey, this microphone doesn't work. It's because it's not a microphone. It's just a control surface. So yelling into it or talking close to it is not going to help you if that's what you're looking to do. So the AMX bar itself, you'll see the picture on the right is the control panel that mirrors, the buttons mirror the puck. And you'll see towards the left of that control panel, that's where you can see your inputs. So the only thing that's available for you to use in the room is USB or Bluetooth. We do not have any cabling connected to optical or the AUX in option. So USB is going to be the most common way to use this bar. The camera, it can be rotated manually. It does move. The microphones are located behind the black mesh area in the front of the bar. They're not visible to you. The speakers are also located in that part of the bar. The televisions. We have several TV models in use and range and age. We could go over all the details of the TV, but I mean, quite frankly, they're TVs. We all have one at home. I think most people are pretty familiar with how a TV functions. They all have either a remote control or buttons on the side or bottom, depending on the model. Really, power, volume, input selector, which we'll talk about a little bit when we talk about troubleshooting. And for those of us who are getting older in age, such as myself, if you remember the old V-hold, H-hold dials, and the UHF tuning knob on a TV, we don't have those. So that's good. We've evolved beyond that. So basic rooms, we're going to talk about typical configurations, and they're going to be scenario based. So in this example, Larry has a small team of 4. He wants to show a PowerPoint presentation to. All the participants, including Larry, will be in the room SALT. The best use, Larry only needs to connect the HDMI cable labeled TV audio video to his computer. Larry's screen will automatically mirror to the TV. Larry's audio output will automatically change to the TV. It's not going to give you audio output from the speaker bar. And quite frankly, in the size of the room and the size of the team, it's not necessary. So my recommendation to save yourself some grief and some trouble, if you're just doing a presentation, plug the HDMI cable in, and that's going to get you everything you need to have a successful presentation in the room. So in this case, there's a picture of that HDMI cable. You just plug it into the side HDMI port on your laptop. If you do not have an HDMI port on the side of your laptop, we do have a variety of converters that are available. Some are at the front desk. I know the IT team, we tend to scroll some away in various places in case those get lost. We can provide those for you. But most of our computers in the organization have an HDMI port on the side. Scenario 2. Sandy has a small team of 2 that will be together in the Verdi room having a Teams call with a vendor. The vendor has 3 participants who are all going to be on Teams. Best use. Sandy should connect the HDMI cable labeled TV audio video and the USB cable labeled AMX camera audio mic. If this is the first time someone's connecting that USB cable to the computer, you might be notified that Windows is either downloading or updating drivers for that device. If you see that prompt on your computer, wait until that concludes. Give it a minute, let Windows update those device drivers so that the equipment works properly, and then go ahead and kick off your meeting. I always recommend, if you've never used these meeting rooms before, please go in a little bit, give yourself a little bit of time. Go in, plug everything in, and make sure you understand what you're doing with it. When launching the meeting on Teams, Sandy, in this case, may need to adjust her meeting settings to use the AMX bar for the camera, audio, and microphone. The speakers will use the USB audio codec. So what I'm showing you here is in Teams, and we'll show Zoom in another example, so you see what that looks like if you haven't seen it before. But in Teams, it's gonna default to the integrated webcam. That is the web camera that's built into your laptop. What I want to do is I want to change that to the AMX Ascendio Vibe. That will give me the camera that's on the bar in the room. Same thing goes for the microphones. Very common misunderstanding. And it's a common complaint that we often see is that people will say, I'm using the sound bar in the room and no one can hear me unless I'm standing in front of my computer. You do sometimes need to change your microphone. So if you maybe had Teams open before, it doesn't always default to the AMX Ascendio Vibe microphone. So go ahead and check that setting before you get your meeting going and make sure that you're using the right microphone. An important note, although they appear very similar, the Kofa and Lemon rooms have an additional piece of equipment installed that makes options slightly different, and it adds a slight layer of complexity to the environment. So that's why I called these the basic plus rooms. Kofa and Lemon, they all have a TV. They have the AMX multimedia bar, but they have an additional piece of equipment that's mounted into the table that allows for analog VGA video out and analog mini stereo out. Those are not microphone connectors. Those are for speakers. So what makes them different? Kofa and Lemon have a device mounted to the bottom of the table that controls the video and audio feeds to the TV. The device is made by a company called Crestron. So you will see those devices come up on your computer, and you might see the Crestron audio driver. You might see the Crestron microphone. So you can see Crestron start to appear. They have the old school VGA and mini stereo outputs. Most computers, I would venture to say, if not all of the computers in use at the ACA, do not have the VGA connectors available anymore. There might be a few floating out there. but generally this is considered dated technology. It's no longer in use. So in this example here is a picture showing those legacy cables in Kofa and Lemon. My suggestion, coil them up, put them in the box, forget they're there. As a general rule, as someone who might be called into the meeting room to help troubleshoot, if I see you have those cables out and you're trying to do something with them, I know that something has gone awry, right? Those cables, they just are not for us anymore. You might say, why don't we take them out? It's probably going to create more problems and work to remove them and that extra piece of equipment than it is to just kind of leave them and tuck them away. So let's talk about the same scenario, right? I'm not going to read through the whole scenario. It's the same scenario for Larry that we did in the basic room. But the only thing that I want to point out is what's different. Larry may need to change his speakers to the Crestron device if he's using the HDMI cable to the TV, because that runs through the Crestron. Same thing with scenario 2. Not going to go through the whole scenario, but what's different? So in this case, the presence of the AMX device and Crestron devices on the computer often will confuse people. It's not uncommon to be called in to help someone and they're confused between whether they should pick AMX or they should pick Crestron. Remember, the bar is AMX, and the Crestron features are really designed for the HDMI output to the TV. So here's how it would look in Zoom. Your speaker, your USB audio codec, depending on your operating system and depending on the version of updates you have, most of the time for your speakers, you will see USB audio codec. I have seen other flavors of that wording on different computers, but it's always very similar. And then again, we have our reliable AMX Ascendio Vibe, which is what we're going to set up as our microphone in this case. So common troubleshooting tips for the basic and basic plus rooms. Problem 1, I plugged my computer into the HDMI plug labeled TV, video, audio, and I don't see anything on the TV. Start basic. As silly as it sounds, start with the simplest. Check and make sure the TV's turned on. Number 1. I noticed that some of the rooms are missing remote controls. If you're missing the remote control, just check on the side panel or on the bottom for the power button, make sure the TV's turned on. There are off chances that you might need to check the TV input option. Sometimes those do get changed. So on the side panel or the remote control, you're going to look for the input option, and you could toggle between the HDMI inputs if there's more than one. If there's not more than one HDMI input, don't change it because the only cable that we have connected to the TV that would be functional for you is HDMI. Third, check the display settings on your computer and ensure that your computer can see the second display. I apologize if this is a little complex. However, in the interest of time, we don't have time to go through the details of how to change your display settings on a laptop. I would suggest you can either practice it at home if you're not familiar, read up about it, or feel free to reach out to Dan or myself if you have a question on how to adjust your display settings. But if you are familiar and you know how to get in there, make sure that you have the option set to duplicate your desktop. That will ensure that whatever is on your computer screen appears on the TV. And if your computer doesn't recognize the TV at all, let us know. It could be an issue with your HDMI port or your video driver that might require some advanced troubleshooting on the part of the IT team. Problem 2, I plugged my computer into the USB plug labeled AMX, camera, audio, mic. and the options to use the device are not available. This generally is because USB is not selected. So you're going to want to check the side panel on the AMX device, ensure USB is selected. If USB is not selected, use the input button to change the setting to USB. Again, you have that option on the puck or the device itself. So now let's say that you've checked the side panel and you look and see the controls are dark and you push the buttons and they don't do anything. The AMX devices do tend to turn themselves off after several days of no use. To remedy this problem, you flip the device forward, you ensure the USB cable is properly plugged into the side, and then you're going to remove and reinsert the power cable into the device. So in the example shown, if you grab a hold of one of those bars and you flip it forward, you'll find that it folds down and opens up. There should be no more than 2 cables plugged into the back, a USB cable and a power cable. They are both labeled with the built-in elastic straps that are there. So you'll see USB. You could pull that out and reset it, and then pull the power and reset that, and you should be back in business in short order. So for the basic plus rooms, we do run into a little bit of different problems because of that Crestron device sometimes. The only advice I can give on that is if you go through the basic troubleshooting steps and you still can't get that to work, please let the IT team know, because there are occasions that the device under the table or behind the TV needs to be rebooted, and we could take care of that in short order. That's rare, but it does happen. So along those lines, we'll go back. So the next problem I want to talk about is people say they can't hear me or I can't hear them. Again, this is going to be a settings problem on your computer for the most part. So as we discussed earlier, we want to make sure that you revisit your Zoom and or team settings and make sure that you're set to use the correct hardware. You want to make sure that you're using the AMX Ascendio Vibe for microphone and camera, and you're using the USB audio codec for the speakers. Also, might sound strange, but people turn those cameras around. Oftentimes I will find them facing the wall, and people will go to use it and they'll say, hey, the camera's not working. It's because it's been turned around. So just check that, make sure it's pointed into the room and not at the wall. The next room I want to talk about is the advanced room. We'll start with Graham. So Graham has recently, as recently as a month ago, been upgraded with a state-of-the-art Polycom video conferencing device and a state-of-the-art TV. The Graham room is by far the easiest and quickest room to set up and function similarly to the basic room configurations, but with more bells and whistles built into the hardware. Graham offers the most flexible presentation and meeting configurations. With your laptop, you're able to host Zoom, Team, WebEx, etc. virtual meetings, and even in-person virtual hybrid meetings are easy to hold. We'll kind of talk about that in a second. But Zoom meetings, team meetings, any virtual meeting platform is supported through your computer for the most part. Presentations over virtual meeting platforms and presentations for in-person attendees are ideal usage. Graham, similar to the basic rooms, we have 2 cables, HDMI labeled TV, video, audio, and we have another that's labeled USB poly, camera, speaker, and microphone. Graham typical configurations. The setup and use of the equipment in Graham mirrors the setup and configuration options for the basic rooms. So I'm going to spare you the conversation of going over all of those settings again. Essentially, you plug in the cables the same way you do for the other rooms, but what's different? Instead of the device appearing as AMX on your computer and camera and microphones will be shown as poly or Polycom, depending. The camera that's installed in the Graham room will and is capable of changing its point of focus depending on who is speaking in the room, ensuring the speaker is always shown. The microphones are directional and they're capable of isolating the speaker in the room, eliminating most, if not all, the background noise. And if you are only using the HDMI cable in the gram room, your audio output will always come from the Polycom soundbar. That's how the installation was completed. So you don't need to worry about that. Zoom rooms. The next set of rooms that we're going to talk about are all Zoom rooms. So in order to effectively use a Zoom room, it's important that we understand how do we use the Zoom control surfaces. So what I'm going to do is, before we go into the minutia of the room, let's talk about that Zoom control surface and its capabilities. So this is what a typical Zoom control surface screen will look like in our organization. The Zoom control surface has all of the functionality needed to manage a Zoom meeting. The Zoom room is considered an attendee of your meeting. It's important to remember that. The Zoom room will need to be a meeting host if you wish to control advanced functions of the meeting from the control surface. The control surface is mostly self-explanable to those who have hosted a Zoom meeting or two. However, there's some advanced options that sometimes people have a hard time finding. So basics, how do I launch a new meeting from the control surface? Fairly straightforward. We just click the orange button that says new meeting. And that will launch a new meeting for the Zoom room. The Zoom room, just so you kind of understand that, in the world of Zoom, the Zoom room is an attendee or a host, so to speak. They have their own Zoom ID, and all of their meetings will have that same meeting ID. They have one, and it's repurposed for that room. How do you invite someone else to a meeting using the control surface? There's an invite button. So once the meeting is launched, if you're doing an ad hoc meeting from the control surface, you can invite people. If you click invite, you have a few options. You can scroll through the contacts that are in the Zoom room. In most cases, there are none specific to the room. So I'm showing here, in this case, email. So you can send an email to Larry at larry.com as an example and say, hey, please join my Zoom meeting. Or if you notice in that screen, you also have the meeting ID available there. So you can share the meeting ID with people. Either, maybe you might have someone on the phone that says, hey, what's the meeting ID? It's right there. You can just read it to them and they can join the meeting from their computer. How do you control on-screen participant view? That's a common question that comes up often. And this is essentially, the question is, hey, I don't want all of the people's squares on the screen. I just want the presenter, or I don't want anything on there, or I do want everyone and their pictures to show up there. How do I control that? Easiest way to do that is click the participants button. There is a More tab. The More tab has all of the advanced functionality within the Zoom world related to your participants. You can enable the join and leave sound. You can automatically mute people when they come in. You could start and live and transcription. And then this is where you also can control who's shown on the screen, and you can also hide yourself if you want to on the screen. How do you mute and non-mute participants? Again, we're going to go to our good friend, the participant button. You click the participant button and you have several options. One is each individual should have a microphone and camera. So you have the ability from there to either mute or unmute their camera or microphone. And you also have a set of buttons on the bottom where you can mute and unmute all. How do you admit and remove participants? Again, we go right back to our participant button. And when someone is trying to join, you have that option available. If someone's waiting in the lobby, you can either admit them or you can boot them out. Advanced Plus Zoom rooms. So let's talk about Humphreys for a little bit. The equipment in Humphreys is significantly different than that of Graham and that of the fourth floor executive conference room. So the equipment that's available in Humphreys, you have in-table microphones, you have a TV, you have a wall-mounted camera, which is available for Zoom meetings only. Same thing for the in-table microphones. You have a Zoom room control surface. So we're going to show you a couple things on that that are different in Humphreys than other rooms. And we have our good friends, the cables. We have an HDMI cable that's labeled TV, video, audio, and we have a VGA and analog output cables. These are the same cables that, remember when we were talking about Lemon and Kofa, we said that this is obsolete data technology. These are those same types of cables. These are designed for those older computers with the old VGA connectors and the old mini stereo plugs on the side. It is a very common misconception among people who use the Humphreys room to think that the audio out cable is for them to plug into their computer to use the in-table microphones. That is not the case. So here's an example of what those cables look like. They're the same on both sides of the table. One thing I want to point out is if you look at the box on the left, you'll see there's a USB port there. That USB port is for charging USB devices. It's for electricity only. Plugging into that USB port doesn't get you anything other than a cell phone charger, essentially. So things that you are unable to do in Humphreys. And I want to point this out because I want to talk about what is and is not a good fit for certain rooms. So when we talk about Humphreys, if you want to host a meeting using your laptop only and use the built-in table microphones, can't do that. Host a meeting using your laptop and only and use a wall-mounted camera. We can't do that. The reason why is the room was designed to be primarily a Zoom room. There is no cabling installed that allow you to plug your computer into the tabletop microphones or the wall-mounted camera. It is integrated with Zoom. What are some ideal uses for Humphreys? One, a Zoom meeting. The room was designed around that premise. Presentations over Zoom, or presentations for in-person attendees only. The room works great for presentations where everyone is present in the room. So let's talk about some scenarios. One, Miguel has a small group of 10 that will be together in Humphreys for an in-person only presentation given by Miguel. By far, this is one of the easiest configurations for everyone to set up. All you need to do is one, you go to the control surface that's on the table, and you're going to turn it on. So you'll see on the bottom left there's an on and off button, and then there where it says video wall source, you have three options. One, conference PC, which is essentially the Zoom room, table box 1 and table box 2. So let's say in this case, I'm going to sit at the head of the table on the far side of the TV. I believe that's table box 1. I'm going to go to my control surface, and all I'm going to need to do is press the button that says table box 1. That should, in most cases, automatically turn on the video display panel for you in the room. If it does not, again, the on-off buttons are on the bottom left. That controls that TV array that's on the wall. So I will take the HDMI cable. I will plug the HDMI cable into the side of my computer, and I will do my presentation to my in-person group. My speakers should automatically adjust to send sound through the TV. If sound is not heard, verify that the volume control surface is not muted and is set high enough. And then again, click the speaker icon on your computer and change your audio output if needed. Again, we don't have a ton of time, so we're not going to get into the minutia of how to make those changes in Windows, but that's what you might need to do. So going back, if you look at the center bottom of the control panel, you'll see where those volume controls are. Common mistake that we see is people will accidentally mute that, and they won't be able to get audio out. Scenario 2, also very typical. Jaden has a small group of 10 that will be together in Humphreys for an in-person Zoom hybrid meeting. Larry, who we met earlier, will be presenting from within Humphreys. So he will be there in the meeting as one of the 10. Larry's presentation contains several funny videos with audio. Best use. Jaden should use the Zoom control surface in Humphreys to power up the TV and conference system as previously shown, then join the Humphreys Zoom room to the meeting. The Zoom control features on the control panel are the same as the ones we just went over for all the other rooms. On that control surface, there's a big label at the top that says, press the home button to toggle between the room and Zoom controls. So to pull up the Zoom control surface, you just hit the home icon, which is on the top left, or I'm sorry, top right of that screen, but I'll show you here in a second. Larry, he should join the meeting from his laptop computer, making sure to select the option to share his audio. That's within Zoom, and I'm going to show you how to do that here in a second. Larry should not plug his computer into any of the cables in the room. Common mistake I see that happens frequently. There'll be a Zoom meeting going on. Someone from outside the organization comes in. They're doing a PowerPoint. The very first thing they want to do is plug their computer into that HDMI cable. That is not the appropriate setup, and it creates all kinds of problems, and it'll never work. So Jaden should instruct other persons in the room to pop up the microphones in the table near them if they will be speaking during the meeting. And let's see if I've got a good picture of that real quick. I do. So you'll see on the bottom of that table box is one of the silver microphones. If you're not familiar, you push that down and it pops up, and that's how you use that microphone. So a word of caution. The Zoom control surface in Humphreys has 2 sets of volume control. It has one for Zoom meetings and one for the room overall. They work, oddly enough, mutually exclusive of each other. So you can have the volume on your Zoom meeting turned all the way up, but if it's turned down for the room will override it. And there's also mute features available for the room as a whole and for the Zoom meeting. So I think the best thing to do is when you're in Humphreys, keep in mind that the hardware has a different control surface than the Zoom meeting. So you kind of want your hardware stuff to just be turned on, and then you want to control your muting and your volume through the Zoom control pad. And then what I'm going to show you here real quick is how to make sure that if your presentation has sound, you can share that sound in Zoom. So the very first thing I'm going to do is click my share screen icon, which brings up 2 options, which you see below: share sound and optimize for video clip. So what that will do is, 1, make sure that the sound from your computer goes through Zoom, but not through your speakers. Why? You're going to get feedback. So you want to make sure that we click the share sound option, and then we click optimize for video clip because that enables compression and it will perform better. Let's say, for example, maybe you didn't know you were going to be presenting, or maybe you forgot to enable these features and you were kind of already in something. There is another way to turn those features on. So if you're in a screen share, you can click on the More button, and then there's an option to share sound that you can get to from there. So there's 2 ways to do that. One before you start sharing and one after. Scenario 3, Kristen works for another state agency. Kristen would like to use the Humphreys room to host a meeting with 10 people on site and 20 people on WebEx. The best use, don't use Humphreys. The room is generally not configured to support this type of configuration. Graham would be a better room. Aho, Bradshaw, Camelback would be better rooms. Humphreys is not ideal. It's not a good fit for this. Scenario 4, Sam would like to bring 10 people into Humphreys to watch a training presented over Teams. The people in the room will be non-participating viewers. Absolutely not a problem. Follow the same steps as we did for an in-person only presentation. The only difference is instead of presenting a PowerPoint, you're just going to put Teams up on your screen. Advanced Plus Zoom Rooms, 4th floor executive. The 4th floor executive room functions in a way which is kind of a combination of Graham and Humphreys. So I'm just going to point out the differences for you in the interest of time. So the equipment available on the 4th floor, TV, the same advanced Polycom device, and then we've added a Zoom room control surface. Cables are labeled the same. It's ideal for Zoom meetings, presentations over Zoom, presentations for in-person attendees, and also because we've added this extra functionality of bring your own device, meetings over other presentation platforms such as Teams and WebEx are fine as long as you bring your laptop with you. And we do offer the Zoom control surface in the room. Cabling is the same as downstairs in Graham, HDMI and USB. Labeling does not change. 4th floor executive combines the equipment found in Graham, which I kind of already alluded to. Non-Zoom use mirrors the setup of Graham, which is why we're not going to go through all the steps in the examples. And Zoom kind of mirrors Humphreys with one minor exception. I'm going to show you that real quick is if you bring your laptop into the room for a presentation and you're not using Zoom, or you bring your laptop into the room and you're doing a Teams presentation, there's one extra step you need to do. So the Zoom control surface is simplified. It doesn't require the use of a separate screen like in Humphreys to control power or input devices. It's automatic. So when you plug that HDMI cable into your computer, you're going to see a prompt that's going to come up on that Zoom control surface, and it says, switch to BYOD pass-through. All you have to do is hit the blue button switch, and it transfers the control to your laptop. And you get all of the functionality of the Polycom box on the wall, like you do in Graham, and all the functionality of the TV, minus the Zoom part of it. Multi-function rooms, Aho, Bradshaw, and Camelback. These guys are a beast. So we have a lot of equipment in these rooms that are available for people to use. We have projectors, 3. We have 3 screens. We have a multi-panel video array, 54 microphones, 3 podium microphones, recording studio quality speakers, 3 presentation computers, USB drive port, HDMI output for an additional TV and monitor, in-floor SLR audio, which you can output to a mixing board or a presser box, which sometimes people call the malt box. We have 3 Zoom control surfaces, sound dampening retractable walls. These rooms are set up to be the most flexible overall. They're probably, in all honesty, and I traveled the state for many years teaching for the state. And I will tell you that these rooms are probably the most flexible and accommodating rooms I've ever seen in Arizona state government. And the consequence of that is they are the most technically complex rooms to operate. So when we talk about these, I want to just give you a few typical scenarios that we're going to encounter. So, ideal uses, there's really nothing that the meetings are not ideal for. So I'm going to save a couple seconds and skip this slide because really they can accommodate just about any kind of scenario. As I mentioned, the usage of the rooms is significantly more complex than our other meeting rooms. The Zoom room control surfaces function identically to those already discussed, so we're not going to go over those. They're the same as the other rooms. Explaining the inner functions of the equipment and control surfaces literally is a full day of training on its own. So we're just going to focus on typical use scenarios in the interest of time. So typical configuration scenario 1. There will be a meeting in the AHO room. There will be 10 people on site and 10 people on Zoom. There will be a PowerPoint presentation and the presenter will be physically present in the AHO room. Review the control panel on the north wall in the AHO room and ensure that the walls are electronically closed. I'll show you that in a second. Note, physically opening and closing the walls does not change their status on the control panels. I can open and close the walls all day. The control surfaces do not know whether they're open or closed unless I tell them. So in this particular case, to verify that, I'm going to use the control surface that's on the wall, and I'm going to click the Setup Rooms option. When I click the Setup Rooms option, this is what I see. And what I'm seeing is that the walls are, in this case, show closed. I know they're closed because there's a double line barrier that appears on a screen between the rooms, and the open wall option is available. If the display does not show the double line barrier and instead says close wall, click the close wall button between the AHO and Bradshaw displays on the control panel. Now, in this example, we are talking specifically about AHO, but all of this conversation pertains to the other rooms. We just happen to be using AHO as the example in this case. Step 2, using the same control panel, ensure that the Zoom PCA button is depressed along with the with the USB A Zoom icon. The only display option in the AHO room is the overhead projector. Clicking the Zoom PCA option will power up the projector and lower the screen. The Zoom room presentation screen will appear. You will control the Zoom room meeting using the techniques that we discussed earlier, and the presenter can share their screen and their PowerPoint using the same techniques we discussed earlier when we were talking about Humphreys. All of those don't change because we're in a different room. So this is what that configuration looks like on the screen. You'll see Zoom PCA is depressed and USB-A Zoom is also depressed. Step 3 is your microphones. In order for people in the room to be heard on the meeting, they need to use the wireless microphones that are present in the AHO room. Persons in the room who join the meeting on laptops or other mobile devices must ensure their microphones and speakers are muted or your meeting will experience feedback. Common complaint. Once the microphone is removed from the charging station, it is essentially live. The microphones are connected to a wireless receiver in the room mounted to the ceiling. A green light means the microphone is live. A red light means it's muted. No light means it's broke. If you don't get a light, set it aside, give it to us. We will have it fixed. Those are your microphone containers. That's the microphone live. And in case you were curious, that's what the wireless receiver on the ceiling looks like. It's not a Wi-Fi access point. It is a Shure wireless microphone receiver. Scenario 2, there will be a meeting in the AHO room. There will be 10 people on site and 10 people on Teams. Interesting, not Zoom. There will be a PowerPoint presentation and the presenter will be present in the AHO room. This meeting configuration follows the same steps as a Zoom meeting with one exception. On the control panel configuration, use presenter or PRES PCA option instead of the Zoom PCA option. You'll be presented with a typical Windows environment that you're going to use with a wireless keyboard and mouse in the room. You would just fire up Teams on the computer like you would on your laptop. This is a new feature that we just added to this room just a few weeks ago. So no one's done it before. But that's what that looks like. You're just going to click the Pres PCA option instead of Zoom PCA, and that will transfer you to the presenter computer. The presenter computers are not physically in the rooms. They're located in a network cage inside the Wi-Fi office area behind locked door. So if you go looking for that computer, you will not find it. Scenario 2. There will be a board meeting utilizing all 3 rooms combined. There will be 30 people present who may or may not speak. There will be 15 people on Zoom. Step 1, review the control panel on the wall in Bradshaw room and ensure the walls are electronically open. There should be no double line dividers between the room icons, and you should see the option that says to close the wall. If a double line barrier appears on the screen between the rooms and the open wall option is available, click the open wall icon, removing the barrier lines between each room. Step 2, using the same control panel, find the column marked video wall. We'll show you in a second. Video wall refers to the large display array at the front of the Camelback room. If you are not using the video wall, you can skip this step. If you are also using the overhead projectors, use the steps that we talked about when we were going over AHO to lower the projector screens and turn the projectors on. You're just going to click all those options on the display. I'll show you in a second, and it'll turn those on for you. To project a Zoom meeting to the video wall, ensure that the Zoom PCB icon is highlighted in blue under the video wall column. So here's what that looks like. So you'll see video wall. We would select the icon for Zoom PCB. You also see there projector A, projector B, projector C. We can also, if we wanted to project the same image on all 3 projectors simultaneously, I can just go from left to right and click Zoom PCB under projector A, under projector B, and projector C. It will automatically power up the projectors and lower the screens. Microphones. When rooms are electronically open, the microphones will work together to create a single environment, meaning that all microphones will broadcast across all 3 rooms. Important. At the end of your meeting, ensure microphones are placed in the correct chargers to ensure they function properly when the rooms are eventually closed. Launch the Zoom meeting. Step 4. The Zoom room presentation will appear on the video array along with any projector screens you selected previously. You will control the Zoom meeting using techniques that we learned earlier. The presenter will share their screen and their PowerPoint using the exact same Zoom presentation techniques that we covered when we talked about Humphreys. Nothing changes because we moved rooms. When all the rooms are combined, this is important. When all the rooms are combined, the Bradshaw control panel is the primary control panel for your meetings. There are 2 sets of volume controls for these rooms, one located on the control panel under room setup and one under the main screen. Oftentimes, people will have the volume on the hardware turned down and the Zoom room volume turned up. They work in conjunction with each other. So when the rooms are combined, so are the volume controls. So here's an example of rooms closed, and you'll see on the left, we see the room setup option, right? So separate volume for each room and additional volume control for a Zoom room. Same thing when the rooms are open, separate volume control. The only difference is on the right, you'll see an option that says media volume all rooms. So these work together. If the control surface that you're seeing, the screen on the left, has all the volumes for the rooms turned down or the wireless mics, etc., turned down, you're not going to get volume out of the speakers. It might sound odd that you can turn the microphone volumes up and down independently of the speakers. There's various reasons for that. But in a meeting situation, you want to make sure all your volume controls are set properly. There is more training available on AHO, Bradshaw, and Camelback in the future. As I previously stated, these are the most flexible and therefore the most complex rooms. What I am suggesting is that your business unit have a AV champion that kind of becomes the subject matter expert for these rooms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule more hands-on training in the future with those individuals who are designated by their business units as kind of the AV champion, so to speak. And we're going to go through scenarios, and we're going to have mock meetings, and we're going to walk through that setup. Because I don't want to underestimate the complexity of these rooms, but I also don't want to underestimate the flexibility of these rooms, which is kind of the consequence, right? Did you also know that we have a Zoom room on wheels? We have a fully equipped Zoom cart. It's available for you to be wheeled to anywhere in the building that you need it. The same Zoom control pad we've been talking about is attached and ready to go. The cart's designed to be plug and play, so as long as you understand the Zoom control surface, which we've talked about, you should be up and running after you plug in the cart, and you shouldn't have any special needs with that. Thank you for your time. We hit an hour on the button. And the one thing that's the most common problem, I'm just going to remind everyone, if you have audio feedback in your room, 99 out of 100 times, it's because someone is in your room with a laptop. They joined your meeting and their microphone and or speakers are on and near a microphone. So feedback is almost always caused by someone with a laptop in the room, in the meeting with their speakers and or microphone on.